The strategy RPG is one of my favorite genres and one that is woefully underserved when it comes to quality titles. Tactics Ogre is considered one of the all-time greats, and I was so excited to dive in. While all the new features make for a fresh, fun experience for the first half of the game, some start to really drag the experience down by the end. Tactics Ogre Reborn is still a fantastic game, but one I wish I enjoyed more by the end. Like most strategy RPGs, Tactics Ogre Reborn is about warring kingdoms vying for supremacy. There's a bit of a power vacuum on the continent and everyone wants to come out on top. Now, if you don't watch the opening movie, this does not get explained at all. Before you start the game, make sure you watch the first opening movie and then wait and watch the second one so you know what's going on, or you'll be very confused. In the game, you play as Denim, and throughout the game, you'll be forced to make tough choices that will drastically affect how the game plays out. You might even miss out on certain playable characters. And what I enjoyed is that the choices were actually really tough and at times made me feel uncomfortable, which I think is a good sign that the developers were doing something interesting. Now, new to Reborn is voice acting. This brings a whole new dimension to the story that was never there before and really brings new life into these characters.
We are not alone in our loyalty. Upon word of your grace's release, many Wallister have left their haunts for Almorica.
And there is still time before the Galgastani come to remedy my freedom.
Now, I'll say in my preview video, I didn't watch the opening movie and I was really confused. Having watched it now, I'm less confused, but no more compelled by the story. In my opinion, there's still way too many characters, way too much going on, and for me, I didn't really have anything to get attached to. These grand-scale political war dramas just never do it for me, and that hasn't changed here. Tactics Ogre Reborn is a classic strategy RPG. You'll bring in your squad of troops, fight in a grid-based map in turn-based fashion. Now, most of the time in battles, your main objective is to defeat one specific troop, but that will change throughout the game, like wiping out the entire map. And as far as the maps themselves, there's a good variety. Sometimes you have to battle elevation like you're climbing up a tower, or there's rivers that you have to cross that kind of damper your movement. The battles are never the same, and you really have to be cautious of the terrain. Now, each character is assigned a class when you get them, however, you don't have to stay with that class, you can change it throughout the game, provided you have a card to change it. Now, you'll need these class cards to change your classes, and you can pick them up from fallen enemies, victory spoils, or you can even buy them from the shops. Now, you'll start off with basic classes you'd expect like knights and archers, but eventually you unlock much cooler ones like terror knights, ninjas, and much more. As you use certain abilities over and over in combat, you'll learn new ones. For example, melee characters can get pincer attack, which will allow you to bounce off and do extra attacks if you're on opposite sides of an enemy. All these abilities allow for fun customization and allows you to build the characters just how you want. One really helpful element is the Chariot Tarot card, which allows you to rewind turns up to 20 turns. This is really helpful if you want to retry an attack from a different angle if you keep missing, or try a different tactic if a character keeps dying. Now, one thing I'll say is that battles have a lot of troops. Sometimes you bring in 12 of your own, and the enemy can have even more than that. To me, the smaller battles were much more enjoyable earlier in the game. However, they can drag in these larger ones, even with the new fast forward function. It feels like you're commanding an army more than a squad, and that just gets tiresome the more troops you have. In my opinion, 8 is kind of the sweet spot, as it feels like that's just the right amount to control without getting tiresome, but any more than that feels like too much. It kind of reminds me of playing a board game with a group of friends where each turn takes an hour. In the end, you had a fun time, but in the moment, it feels like it's just never gonna end. There's also an element of crafting in Tactics Ogre Reborn, and that becomes increasingly important as the game goes on. You'll mainly do this for enhancing gear, like getting a +1 version of armor or sword, not necessarily to craft new items. I say not necessarily because to craft higher level items, you'll need a lot of rare materials, and to do that, you'll just need to grind battles over and over, and it just becomes cumbersome and almost not worth it. Now, I want to get into some minutia here because it really tampered down my enjoyment of the game. So the game caps your team's max level until you get past certain story battles, and then it gets raised again and you can level up your characters. I don't necessarily mind this, but story battles start getting really challenging in chapters 3 and 4, and you'll just wish you could grind, but you can't. Well, you can grind, you can do extra battles, but you won't be able to level up, and these battles don't give you money. Really, the only benefit is that you can increase proficiency with certain classes or maybe unlock an extra move or two. It's annoying enough that you can increase levels, but not being able to get extra money makes it way harder to finish these story battles, especially if your team isn't properly geared up. and you'll need to be if you want any chance of winning. Also, shops don't sell the MP restoring items, you can only find them in battles. And this is a big deal because MP is so vital for pulling off special attacks against bosses, because normal attacks don't do very much damage and you'll need those special attacks if you want any prayer of winning. And this makes for a vicious cycle of frustration and difficulty, and it seems by design. I feel like if the game removed these restrictions, it would make for a much more enjoyable experience. Before I move on, I do want to talk about some of these new features because they are great for the most part. For one, there's a totally new user interface. When you're on the battlefield trying to decide what you're going to do, it makes it way easier to navigate, just pick the right move and move on. There's also a new fast forward option. Now this won't make the game go in super fast forward to where you can't tell what's going on, but it does speed things up just enough to make them more tolerable. Now originally this game does have the green tarot cards that drop from enemies, however in Reborn there are new battle cards that are blue that drop randomly throughout the battlefield. These blue cards will give enhancements like increased stats, increased crit rate, and much more. You can grab them, but also the enemies can. So it adds a really interesting dynamic to kind of shake things up in the battles. Overall, I would say I enjoyed the gameplay. There's a lot of cool abilities that play off each other, and it just makes for some really engaging battles. It feels really great when you execute a perfect strategy. However, the artificial difficulty gets really frustrating as the game goes on. You'll feel like you'll just be zooming along and having a great time, and then you just hit these giant brick walls out of nowhere. And also, the larger battles feel like they go on way too long. The fast forward option is a nice touch, but it doesn't quite do enough to cut down on the tedium. As far as the remaster goes, Tactics Ogre Reborn receives some nice visual enhancements, and others that don't quite hold up. For the ones that do hold up, the character portraits, menus, and maps all look great, and the opening movie looks absolutely gorgeous. That said, the character models blown up on a big screen don't look great at all. Now in my demo video, I got asked a lot if you could turn this filter off, but it's not a filter, that's just how the game looks. It's unfortunate because I feel like if they redid the sprites in that HD 2D look or just enhanced the sprites somehow, it would have been great, but unfortunately the character models just don't look that great here. Now I reviewed this on Nintendo Switch, and playing in handheld mode definitely takes away that washed out pixel look. And the game still runs at 60 frames per second there, so if you're trying to decide on what platform, then the Switch might be the way to go. Now one aspect that does hold up really well is the music. It's really, really good. Everything from the powerful opening movie theme to the character menu screen create an amazing vibe. Normally I would listen to a podcast or some kind of YouTube video while playing a game like this, but I had to let the music do its thing. It's just too good to tune out. I also want to applaud the voice acting one last time. I did not expect it here, but the performances are great and really elevate the story. Tactics Ogre Reborn is a solid remaster of a strategy RPG classic. It brings a host of new enhancements to make it more playable and has a timeless gameplay system that still holds up in 2022. That said, there still are a few things that hold this game back from me truly loving it. I wish the battles weren't nearly as big, and I wish there weren't so many artificial difficulty walls. These gripes might not be a hurdle for some, in which case you absolutely gotta play this game. But if you're like me and these sound like they might get in your way, I think you could still enjoy the game, but just maybe not as much as you'd hoped. And for those wondering, you're probably looking at 40 to 50 hours here, depending on how much you use the fast forward function and how many side battles you want to participate in. Now, if you're like me and love strategy RPGs and want to hear about a bunch of great ones, make sure you check out my latest video where I count down my top 10 3DS JRPGs. It's full of strategy RPGs, and the #1 game might even be one. And if you love JRPGs and want even more content just like this, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.